Hey folks, Trevor Boehm here, founder of the Uncivilized Movement, author of the books Today I Rise, Man Uncivilized, and the host of the Uncivilized podcast. What I have for you today is internet men's sensation Elise Michaels, who's a really, really well-known men's coach, and she and I are sitting down for a conversation that's quite unique. Yes, we talk about men's work. Yes, we talk about how men can change their lives, but we also dive into Elise's personal story. If you've ever followed my work or followed the podcast, you know I'm as interested in the human behind the microphone as I am in what they do. And so Elise has had a really, really wild last couple years where she grew her following from a small, healthy following to over 1 million followers. And in the same time was navigating an abusive relationship where she was being cheated on constantly. She didn't know this till the end, but just knew it was a really awful relationship and had a spiritual awakening at the end of that conversation or at the end of that experience and dove headfirst into Christianity. So, yep, it's a little bit of a mixed bag episode, but from what I've heard from people who've listened to it, they got a ton out of it. So I know you will as well. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, share this with someone in your life. Let me know how I can better serve you and what you got out of it. Enjoy the episode.
Bubbly
Elise
water
Michaels.
makes me gag.
We're keeping that. That's the best start to a podcast ever.
Mineral water is trash. 99% of your followers will hate me now. Sorry. It's dehydrating and tastes like crackly paper. I don't know.
Welcome back. It's so good to have you back on. I think we were just discussing, it's been 3 years since you and I chatted. And for those of you who don't know Elise, she's going to give a 30-second elevator spiel on who she is. But we also did an episode that I'm linking in the show notes, October 10th, 2022, called Understanding How Men Tick as a Woman. It's a very popular episode, so I wanted to have Elise back on. Who are you? What do you do? Talk to my peeps who don't know you.
Well, hello again. My name is Elise Michaels, and I have, for the last over 4 years, been a men's mental health coach. So I help men find purpose and passion again by healing subconscious trauma. And a lot of my content focuses on traumatic undergoings that men experience and validating that experience and little snippets on helping them work through that.
Beautiful. It's so important. I love your content. But what I love most about it is whatever the spaces that you create, it is very permissionary, if that's a word, for men, because I watch them actually comment, which is not common in the male social media interaction space. So I love it. I'm also really curious, Elise, what's top of mind for you, or like what do you see coming up? Because I feel like you're in a unique position of like having your finger on the pulse of male mental health. And a lot's changed in your world, which we can hop on in a minute since we talked last, but a lot's also changed in the mental health landscape in the last couple of years. So I'm curious, what are people reaching out to you about? What are you hearing about?
So definitely a lot has changed in the last 4 years. When I first started, there seems to be really no support for men's mental health. And so it was kind of like at the peak of this wave of people becoming very aware. You know, it was the start of 2020, the world was shutting down. So mental health became the fad for the next 2 years. And then men's mental health rolled out on top of that. So I've seen men's mental health specifically become very much a trend, a fad. There's a lot of men's mental health coaches out there, or men's coaches, period. And men's mental health itself is on a spectrum, right? There are still men who resist even acknowledging their mental health. And then there are the men who have gone, you know, above and beyond. They've already gone through it. Now they're over it. I'm starting to see people becoming very over the mental health movement because as anything becomes a fad and a trend, it goes into the extreme. And then people are now going into the victim mentality, and people don't want to be victims anymore. So I've seen men now go from not acknowledging their mental health to acknowledging their mental health to acknowledging their mental health in a way that makes them feel too feminine. And now they're going back into the extreme masculinism again, where it's like, hide some of those feelings, shove it down, be a man. It's really interesting to watch it go full circle.
fucking feelings, man. They're like, that's what we should name we'll name the episode. That's so interesting. So what do you think drives them not back to a middle point? Like, I understand a pendulum swinging too far, and the goal is hopefully that it comes back to middle, not swings too far the other way. Why do you think those guys who have worked with their feelings, worked through their feelings, are now like, let's suppress and squash and just go back to the Marlboro Man?
I think because a lot of mentors follow the fad because they want to jump on the bandwagon and make money, or they experience something that changed their life, but their
Mm,
focus is not thinking long term. So they
mm,
determine the success based on the external results that they get, but the external world is always changing. So, like,
mm,
and this is not to compare me to anybody else, but when I've always started my coaching, I try to think long term. What is going to get you through every shift in the economy, every shift in the
mm,
societal economy, right? The emotional economy, to make you feel steady and stable, so that you're not basing your success off of how women are responding in this day and age, how the
mm,
political environment is in this day and age. So the reason I say that is because if they base their results off the success of that time period, they're now failing in XYZ time period. So they need to move
mm,
on to something else. So they're constantly jumping from healing modality to different way of
mm,
thinking, because they're trying to catch up with the moving times instead of latching onto a long-term healing modality that gets them through all of them, is what I
mm.
suspect. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I can see because it feels like healing has been commoditized, that it is almost like dip your toe in this water, dip your toe in that water, dip your toe in that water, as opposed to, hey, stick with one thing till you get the results that you want. But
yeah.
I'm also super curious why those men, and I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot. You may not have the answer to this. Why don't they then, so like, okay, I've worked through my feelings, I've gone to therapy, for a year of my life started my sentences with like, well, my inner child and my inner little boy, and I talk like that for a while, and then now have graduated to what should be, I imagine, a more deeply embodied just sense of okayness and wellness as a masculine man. Why do you think that the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater?
Because a lot of mentors are stuck on being sick. Right? So you're
Mm,
constantly talking about what's
yeah,
wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. Stay in your
right.
healing modality, staying in your healing modality. And and this is not to, like, I'm not shooting down any modalities or any coaches, but I'm just saying sometimes we can get so stuck on thinking that we need to keep doing XYZ that it only keeps us in the place where we're sick.
Mm,
Just like AA, you go to AA and you can be done with alcoholism, but you go and you still have to say, I'm an alcoholic. And in
sure.
some point in time, it's still going to keep you in that cycle, to keep you attached to it. So men need a purpose. They need
Mm,
eventually they need something to work on. They need something to do. So after they're done kind of figuring out the inner child stuff, it's like, okay, what now? And if that teacher is stuck on the trauma train and they're not
mm,
helping them move forward, then they're going to be like,
mhm.
okay, well, this isn't working anymore. And they're going to find something else instead of saying, okay, I've embodied this. Now, like, what's next? They're not thinking
Yeah.
embodiment. They're thinking everything's outside of them.
Mm, okay, that makes a lot more sense. I'll just share openly with you and everybody listening. It was maybe 3 months ago, I sat down with my own team and said, "Hey, I get the pandemic, I get the uprise in mental health, but, like, don't forget the gorilla in our branding. Like, don't forget, like, we wanna have programs and opportunities and messaging that says, 'Cool, you've been to therapy for 2 years. Go kick some ass. Go make some money. Go live your fucking dream life. Go build the company. Go do like, don't forget that there's, like, badassery mixed into this movement.'" If I can put you on this, I'm gonna just keep putting you on the spot rather than asking if I can put you on the spot. Would you say that most of the guys that come to
I
you
just, as long as
are
you know that I'm not like an expert, I haven't done any scientific studies. I don't want people coming after me like, she's just, this is all theoretical. I'm glad that you're putting me on this pedestal. But for anybody listening, I'm not a scientist. This is my theoretical observation. I mean, I'm pretty good, but
you're on the
backed by
street.
science.
That's what I'm gonna say. Like, you got
I'm on the
street
streets.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, your finger, I didn't mean it like that. Like, you have finger on the pulse, right? Like, before I started Uncivilized, I talked to men at least for a year straight. Just anybody who emailed me, I was on the phone with them. And people were like, "Well, what are your credentials?" And I was like, "A year of the truth." That beats most people out there. I'm not going to claim I'm a psychologist or a therapist or a psychiatrist, but I've talked to so many men. And that's where I say, like, you are an expert. You may not have a plaque designating you that, but if we go contact hours with men who are in a position to tell the truth, I put you in that position. So I'm curious, do you think, if we took the swath of men as a whole, now July 10th, 2024, are there more who need to dive into their feelings and work with therapists and emotional intelligence? Or are there more who we now need to go, hey guys, you need to fucking deadlift, eat some steak, get some goals, and get out there and start kicking ass again? Or do you feel like it's still pretty balanced?
Well, I think once again, those are two extremes. I think you
Hmm.
need both of those components in your life. I don't think you can just go to the gym and completely ignore your feelings and ignore your emotional availability. And yet you cannot just go to a therapist for 10 years and never do anything.
Yeah.
You have to have both, and ideally both at the same time, because one
Hmm.
is your action and one is your inner investment. And you need to
Hmm.
do both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Elise, what is the struggle that you're seeing? If you had to go like top 5, let's take the top 2 men are struggling with right now.
I mean, there's a huge war between men and women.
For sure.
So I see a lot of hate on women, just like you see
Okay.
a lot of hate on men, but obviously I'm in the men's mental health space. So
Sure.
any post I make will always get comments blaming women, hating
Mm.
women, saying women are trash, just pump and dump, use them and
Mhm.
lose them. And obviously it bothers me because I'm a woman. So I'm like, okay,
Yes.
it can't be all women because I've literally created this page, but
Mm.
it's how do you shift that mentality? And I think it's part of the way that we've gone with the victimhood. Like, we have
Mm.
validation and then we have victimhood. And I think that we're grasping on blaming somebody else for our pain because it's easier, but it's not the way to solve anything.
Mm. Do you feel like, as a woman, part of your brilliance or position and success is because you actually mirror the opposite of what so many of those men will say view as a woman, and then they have to now confront, like, wow, here's someone who's intelligent and successful, and she's not shitting on me, and she's not trying to marry me to take my money and ruin my life just for funsies because that's what women do. Do you feel like that's like a part, maybe like an undercurrent of what your role is, if that's a way to say it?
Definitely. I mean, I hope that it can give them hope because,
Mm.
if even if I'm bothered, if I'm reactive, it only goes to prove a point, right?
Mm.
And I want men to know that I'm definitely not the only woman. There are women in my DMs and in my comments that say, like, I just want to find a good man. I want him to understand that I care about his feelings and care about his emotions and that I'm a safe space for him. And it's really hard because they just shut me out. And
Mm.
to really try and bridge this gap is the goal, because men and women are a lot more desiring to be in love with each other than we think. And we're just all so hurt that we put up this wall and then we use the assumptions that we see from the internet,
Yeah.
and it continues to create the divide. So I
Yeah.
hope that channels like mine and the other men's mental health coach, they give hope for men to feel like there are women out there who care about you.
Mm. I agree and know that there definitely are, not just because of my own DMs, but my own life experiences. Um, I've been divorced, I've been wounded by women, and I know those are individual people and not the collective. And it makes no sense to broad stroke the collective. Otherwise, I'd be one of those men, because I'm a man, that would be in all of those broad strokes. I want to ask you though, because I think this is something that I don't personally struggle with, but I get the struggle from so many men. Is the classic, I did open up, I was vulnerable, I did share the thing, and then it was used against me. I was shamed or I was left. Now that's a classic challenge that men will bring forward. And I know why,
Mhm.
because it actually has happened. I'm so curious because I've been thinking about this. Let my mind ramble for a second. I just saw a big post the other day that said, "Men, do not be vulnerable with your woman." And this was a prolific men's coach, and I was like, "Oh fuck, here we go." And it was like, it will be viewed as weakness. It will be used against you. Don't do it. And I like threw my hands in the air. I was like, I get it. A lot of guys have been burned by this, but there is no relationship without vulnerability. There isn't anything. If I called you every night and was like, here was my day. I went to the gym. I ate a sandwich. Have a good night. And you did the same. Great. Awesome. It's no, thank you. I don't want the news. So I'm curious how you guide the men who work with you to navigate what is also a very real problem. And sorry, let me add one more point before you answer. This is what I've been struggling with. I've told a lot of guys, if that happens, I'm not saying good, but like good because now you know who the woman is. But then this morning I was thinking that's a lot like handing someone a knife and then they stab you and you're like, good. Now I know who not to hand knives to, but I'm also still bleeding and need to go to the ER. So it feels like a chicken egg or like a divine conundrum. How do you advise your men to handle that? I know that was a long ass question.
No, I totally understand, and I've made what feels like countless posts about this, and always the comments are super angry because you have to meet people where they're at.
Mm,
And if someone is in a place of wounding and hurt, you can't really tell them how to move forward because you need to nourish the pain first. So let's first
mm,
validate the fact that there are a lot of women out there who do not like men being vulnerable, who are going to use it against you, who are not good listeners, who are emotionally immature. But keyword, they are emotionally immature. They are the type of person to use something against you. They are the type of person who's not a good partner. And that's the thing that we really need to look at and latch onto is when you yourself are in an emotionally immature state, which means you don't really necessarily understand your own emotions, your feelings, your availability, you are going
mm,
to partner with someone who is equally that way. So you have partnered with someone starting off not being vulnerable, and they liked that you were a shell of a person. So, of course, you start coming in with all these feelings and you awaken stuff within them that they don't like. Of
mm,
course, they're going to use it against you because you partnered with someone who didn't want that in the first place. But you're hurt because you've become attached. And usually you've become attached because they are a representation of a childhood wound that you have. So we have to start understanding as we awaken our consciousness and start incorporating healthy behaviors into our life. Of course, people in our life are going to have to fall away because we
mm,
attracted a bunch of people who were not healthy, who were not in
mhm,
alignment. And that freaking hurts. And there's no way to heal that hurt in the moment except for, time and taking care of yourself and prevention. But sometimes you can't prevent it before it's already happened.
yeah.
The thing that happens with men, and I'm sure you've seen this, is they have that experience and they're like, oh my God, I'm never opening up to a woman again. They hate vulnerability. They saw me as weak. Instead of understanding, like you said, no, that was That was God in the universe clearing the dust and crust from your life, saying, oh, I see you're starting to become a new person. You're being healthier now. You want someone who accepts you for you. Well, I have to get this person out of the way and make space for that new love to come into your life. So when all of a sudden that person leaves and then you shut down your own vulnerability, you put yourself in an encased isolation that only draws in depression, anxiety, anger, bitterness, and you've cut yourself off just before the good stuff gets to you, just before the good stuff starts to happen, because the flow was coming to you and you cut it off. That was a long answer.
No. I love long answers, first of all. So thank you. I love the when you're like outlining, you'll attract at that level, because I would be so curious how long you would last in a relationship where the first time you cried, the next day the guy was like, wow, you are so weak. You're such a wimp. I can't believe you actually shed tears. I think like, I would give
I
him
would never
about
be in that
30 more
relationship.
seconds. Right. Or yeah, you wouldn't even be in it in the first place. I've
Because
said
now I have a
said to
super
my
detector, but that's the thing is, sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
Go ahead, please. You have a super detector.
I was just going to say, because I've only been able to super detect things because I've been through the experience. So, like you said, you've had bad experiences, I've had bad experiences, and as good as we think we are, sometimes until you have the experience, you can't know. So, these bad painful experiences, eventually they just become the cost of the tuition for saving time in the future.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I really like how you that way. I will also add that I can look back in those relationships and have some level of culpability of like, okay, I was doing almost the exact same thing, perhaps in a different way. So same level, you're right. Like it's like same third floor. We were both on the third floor, and now I'm pissed because we're on the third floor. But like, guess who was meeting her there on the third floor? Hi, my name's Traver. I'm a third floor person. Uh, do when you say this though, Elise, when you talked, because I want to get like again street level. Does this land? If you have guys that are like, nope, fuck it, I'm never opening up to another woman. That's terrible. The last one proved my point. Like I knew it all along. Is there anything you find that like just softens that a tiny little bit?
Well, my clients aren't like that because when they come to me, they're ready to heal. I have people in my comment section who are like that. And to be honest, you're not ready till you're ready.
Mm.
And you can have someone be as kind as possible to you that shows you the opposite of anything you've ever experienced. And it still won't be enough if you are resistant to being open to the fact that something could be different. So sometimes in my comment section, they'll be like, you're 100% false, blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like, okay, well, could there be a world in which there's even 1% of truth? Because if you can have 1% of truth, well, then you can have a possibility, right? Nothing is ever 100% anything. But that just takes time and repetition. And
Yeah.
it's not a job for somebody else to do. And maybe I don't want to get demonized from this podcast, but this is just the truth. Like, you can't fix somebody. They have to be willing to be open to it.
Yeah. I completely agree. You won't get demonized. I'll celebrate that. I often just leave the comments section alone because of that. Because it's such a like, really? They're all like that? There's 3.5 billion women, and every single one is going to shame you for having emotions. The 500 who've emailed me in the past 2 weeks saying this is the type of man I actually want, just for they're lying. They had nothing to do that day but fabricate an email or a DM, right? They want to get you, Bob 226. Like they just want to crush your emotions. But I also understand that hurt place, right? And how strong the protection mechanism is. So yeah, I think I'm curious with the ones who do come to you willing to heal, when you propose this and they're like, okay, I get it. Maybe there is a way forward. What does step one look like for those guys?
Well, the number one determining factor that I see for success in clients and in anyone is they take accountability. They don't come in saying it's all XYZ person's fault. They come in saying, okay, I know I have things to work on. They talk about the pain of the experience, but then they always go, but it's not just them, it's me, and I have to figure out what I did wrong. And so they're very open to looking at the behavior patterns, to understanding that they were on the same floor, the floor 3 as the other person. And you stop making it about the other person, because you start to say, oh, what part of me was attracted to someone who wanted to reject me? What part of me wanted to earn love from someone because maybe in the past I felt like that's what I had to do? And we start looking at where the core wound started, and then it heals it, and it stops making it about women altogether. And it starts to make it about the inner child, the young boy who didn't get loved the way he should have. And once you start to heal that, you stop seeing the world as so evil, and you start to have this peace within you. You embody the ability to see the difference, see the world without rose-colored glasses on.
Ooh. Yeah, I can feel how powerful that must be, especially for men who I feel like they're all gonna lie to me, they're all gonna shame me, they're all blah 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 is like neck up. That's very hard to have as a neck down experience because it's not true. And your body's gonna be like, nah, I don't know about that. But up here in the noggin, it's like, oh yeah, let me gather evidence. There's so much proof. What are some of the ways, Elise, that when you work with men, you try to get them back into their bodies or into a more truthful state than the grind of the lawyer that's living in their head protecting them?
Yeah, so we always do some type of somatic experience. That's the first kind of lesson I teach every man. I'm sure you do too, is you can't do anything if your body is in a state of fight or flight. So you have to
Yeah.
get rebalanced, or else your prefrontal
Mhm.
cortex, the part of the brain that's in charge of logical thinking, is shut down. So if you're a man who is feeling very bitter and angry and is saying things like all women, all XYZ, chances are you're in fight or flight, and your
Mhm.
prefrontal cortex actually isn't activated, because anybody who's thinking logically never says all or nothing anything. It just doesn't make sense. It's not actually a logical answer.
Right.
So when you can feel more relaxed, you're more open to, first of all, having different ideas, different experiences. Um, but then it's just diving into validating yourself, to understanding,
Mm.
okay, I did go through a hurtful experience, and sometimes it's not our fault. Like, we forgive ourselves for what we wanted over what we needed to hear, right? Like, something
Mhm.
I said to myself is, I wanted to be loved more than I wanted to be right, because sometimes we see the
Mm.
red flags and we know the truth, but we push it under the rug because we want what we want so much more than we want to be
Yeah.
right.
Mm. I don't know how to ask this, so I'm gonna fumble through it. Do a lot of the men who come to you speak about wanting love specifically, rather than I want to be in relationship? I want to have a partner who. I'm really curious if that word as I, I know they get it and they understand it, and but is that the entry point of I want someone to love me? I want to love someone. I don't get that. I get a lot of guys who are like, hey, it's time, looking to start a family, looking to shift things. I want a relationship. I want to be in relationship. But it feels like perhaps for a lot of men, the love and relationship conversation are two separate entities. So I'm curious if you hear that brought forward a lot with your guys.
I hear exactly what you hear. Everything is very surface
Mhm.
level, because surface level is usually all men are taught to know. They don't
Mhm.
think about the difference between love and relationship. They don't think about the difference between love and sex. They don't think about the difference between intimacy and sex. Like, that there are differences between all of these things, nobody really ever gave them space to think about it. So when you enter into a room where you can start to be vulnerable, it's up to the practitioner to ask the questions to help you arrive at that destination. Okay, what does relationship actually mean to you? And they're like, what do you mean? No one's asked me that before. I have journal questions. I go, you know, how do you know when you're loved? How do you know when you love someone? And they have to think about it for a long time. How do I know when I love someone? Oh, when I want to take care of them. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? You have to allow people to start understanding what things actually mean, because then it forces them to slow down and no longer rush into what they've already known. And once you start to unveil your subconscious, you can't unsee it.
Say a little more about that if you would. It feels like an interesting thread.
Yeah, so 95% of what we do is subconscious. It's on autopilot, and only 5% is conscious thought every day. So the way that you're attracted to someone, the way that you do things, the way that you operate in your normal life is just part of some program you learned a long time ago from what you experienced, what you felt, what you've known. So once you start to realize what you actually think about something, like if you've never thought about love before and then somebody brings it up, how do you know when you're loved? It pulls it out of the subconscious, like, whoa, I was not thinking about that, but now I am thinking about it. And once I've actually realized what it is, I can't forget. It's now in my conscious part of my brain. And the more behaviors that we can pull out and examine and realize, the more different of a person you become, because you're no longer operating based upon your past templates.
Right. And then you have choice. If it's on autopilot, there's no real choice. I don't have a choice when I touch a hot stove. Like, am I going to pull my hand away? Am I going to burn it? It's just, whoosh, it's immediately gets pulled. So I love that. Love it. Love it. I want to shift. I have a couple more ideas. The first one may be a little bit heavy, but one of the things I know is that men, right before they take their lives, often use the terms hopeless and or helpless. And so I'm curious for you, just speaking your opinion, I'm not putting you on as like a psychologist. When men come to you with that, not of saying I'm going to be suicidal. Let's take that equation and put it to the side for a second. Just the terminology. Elise, I feel hopeless and helpless and or helpless. What are some of the ways you help men shift just slightly out of that perspective?
The best way you can do that for someone in that moment is to just listen and validate their experience, because a lot of people try to push them into a different experience by being positive, like forcing them into a positive mindset because they're scared, right? They're like, I don't like how this is sounding. I want to save them, right? So they're like, think about all the people you love, think about how talented you are. And the thing is, you're continuing to invalidate the fact that they feel helpless and they feel hopeless. So you have to be with them where they're at and just sit with them there, because if you can sit with them where they're actually at in the helplessness and in the hopelessness, well, then they have a friend. Then it's not so helpless and it's not so hopeless, because you're meeting them actually where they are at. A lot of people don't want to meet them where they're at. So it's a lot of validating. Like, if you're listening to this right now, I understand that you feel helpless and hopeless. There's a lot of things to feel helpless and hopeless about. Why don't you tell me more about it? Like,
Right.
why do you feel helpless and hopeless? And then, okay, is there a way that we could feel less helpless and hopeless? Is, like what, do you feel that way in this moment when I'm listening to you? You start to bring ourselves back into the moment. Because if we can find ourselves in the moment, we can find some safety. And if we can find safety in the moment, we can start to build our own ladder instead of being pushed into a reality that we don't want to look at right now.
Beautiful.
That's
Thank you.
from my perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think the love and light community, God bless them, have bypassed a lot of where I think men aren't given enough credit or permission to say, like, I can sit in some shit, right? Like, I just wrote a whole book on how do you be with your darker parts and be in the dark periods of your life. And I feel like we can do that. We just don't know that we can do that, or we haven't been told that that's okay, right? One of our ethos tenets is your deepest gifts go in the garden of your wounds. And that came to me after working with a Jungian therapist who was like, get in the fucking mud. Get like, I want you, the deeper you go into depression, the gemmy, like the gold, more gold and gems you'll find. And I was like, man, I've never heard this before. I've always been told, like, well, go for a run and fucking love and light it, you know? So I appreciate your saying meet people where they are. I love it, Elise. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and a lot
What
of
would
people
you
don't want to meet
good.
people where they are because they are afraid to go into their own darkness. And that
Mm,
is a fatal flaw. You know, it's not that we want everybody to be freaking thinking suicidal thoughts. That's not where it is at all. But I mean,
please
I'm
don't
sure
take
you've
that
been
away
in a
from me.
dark place. I have been in a dark place many times. And I think
Mhm.
people uh, and it's almost like it's a travesty that there's so many people who've thought of suicide. I would say like 99% of people have thought of suicide at some point, whether
Sure.
it's just bypassing or not. It's almost a joke, right? Because like we're just not taking it as seriously because so many people are in this place. And to
Mm.
understand it is almost it's not just like necessarily a depression when you're seriously thinking about it. It feels logical. It feels
Mm.
like this is the only way that I can help other people. It doesn't
Mhm.
feel selfish. It feels like I'm a burden. I don't know how, like, and you feel like a burden because you know you're experiencing all this heavy thoughts and nobody wants to hear it. You know that it's going to bring people down. You know that, like, they just going to push you into positivity. So, of course, you feel helpless and hopeless and alone. So, if somebody can
Yeah.
just sit with you there and be like, dude, I get it. And, I want to kill myself too. Like, not in a joking way. I'm making a joke of it now, and also because
Sure.
me and some of my closest friends have actually had these conversations, so that's why I'm speaking on it like this. It
Sure.
helps so much more when somebody just understands, and you can be there in the dark and you have someone listening to you, and they're like, you know what, I feel you on this. Like, let's take it minute by minute, hour by
Mm.
hour, and like, let's get some sleep, and let's go for a walk, let's reevaluate tomorrow how we feel. And eventually you can climb out, you can get better, but you need someone to be able to be there with you. That's why it's like not good to talk to friends and family about it necessarily. It's better to talk to a professional because they have the toolkit, they have the space, they can help you walk through. They're not going to love and light you. They're going to help you through the darkness side by side.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think one of the most powerful sentences on earth is "I believe you." And just leave it at that. Like, "Hey, I feel like shit. I believe you. I'm in a dark fucking spot. I believe you." Just like, "Oh, thank you. Thank you for not grabbing my hand and trying to run me somewhere that I'm not." Super powerful. I appreciate that. Thank you. Do you mind if we shift a little bit more just to you? Because I know since the last time we've talked, a lot has come up for you. And the reason I'm asking, Elise, is because a lot of the audience that's attracted to this podcast, it isn't just men wanting to be better men. It's a lot of people who are going through transition, or a lot of people who are fighting transition, or a lot of people who know transition is just around the corner. And so they've dug their heels in and are like, no, thank you. Don't want transition. So I know your life has shifted since we talked last, and we can take this in any of the directions that you feel comfortable speaking. Uh, an awakening, we can call it spiritually, having a relationship end, moving back into the country and kind of reestablishing from a nomadic position. Um, what was the
I like
most
how you summed it up before we started the call. Why don't you give everyone the 10-second rundown that you gave me before we started? Well, at least since I last saw you, this is what I've heard.
this is
It
what I've
was
seen
great.
on social media. You've broken up, been broken up with, found out you were pathologically cheated on the entire time, moved to America, tripled your business, and found Jesus. So,
And grew my following by 300,000, I think, since we last
yeah, and
spoke.
have a lot more people now talking to you.
Yeah,
You've been through an initiation.
always.
Yeah. Well, and we talk about it a
This
lot
isn't.
here. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Go ahead. An initiation is a controlled death. And I even feeling you, I want to say this respectfully and politely of like you feel different than you did 2.5 years ago. And I mean that just of the I'm not going to use this word in the way it commonly is, but like the depth of maturity, the embodiment, the alignment, the solidity of how you're now presenting both yourself and your message is different. So that to me often says, "Oh, this person's been through some shit." Right? This person's gotten their face rubbed on rock bottom for a little while. So yeah, walk us through some of what's happened in your life. And also if we could tie it to how has that helped you or shifted your perspective on men? Because I know one of the big pain points was from a man,
Mm.
and yet one of the awakenings is also the teachings of a man.
Yeah, so I appreciate that acknowledgement of my growth. I've gone through so many of these transitions in my life, to be honest, that I'm used to it. I'm used to the
Mm,
crucifixion of my old self. So change for me has never been something I've feared. I've had to do it since I was young. So I've always been the adapter. And what did that make me? It made me a very hyper independent woman. So for my whole life, I've been go, 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 boss lady, hyper independent, very masculinized. And it also makes you like very like I wasn't controlling, but you are kind of like controlling, codependent. Like I would give up myself for men in the way like when I get in a relationship, it was I just changed my entire self so that they could never abandon me. They could never have an excuse to leave
mm,
me because I just wanted to be perfect for them. I didn't like have myself anymore. It was just all about making them happy. Um,
mm,
and so I realized a lot of that in my relationship before this last one. So I tried really hard not to be codependent in the last one, but there were a lot of wounds that I like it was like the last of the wounds that I needed to like because I shouldn't have gotten in that relationship in the first place. So it was like, oh, now I need to understand that the second I see a red flag, you don't just push it aside and think that because you have all the tools, it's now your job to fix them. So anyway, yeah, the last 2 years since we've last spoken, I feel, at least I am still trying to shift out of I feel like I've shifted a lot out of the hyper independence. I used to be headstrong, like once again, I don't want to get villainized for this, but I shifted from like being 50-50 girl to
mm,
wanting to be in a provider, like having my partner be a provider, wanting to be taken care of, wanting to just fall into
mm,
my feminine, wanting just like a completely different life. I didn't want to get married before. I didn't want to have kids before. That
mm,
all completely shifted in that last relationship. What I expect from men is totally different. What I expect from myself as a woman is totally different. Um, a lot of shifts have been made, so it's like there's been a lot of understanding for men um, on the back end of building, almost a million followers in the past couple years. I was going through this toxic, abusive relationship from a man. Um, so I'm pretty proud of myself for that. I did 30 countries under 30, hit that goal, and then I decided to settle down in Florida. So yeah, like a lot has shifted. I know that like kind of like maybe went off on the storyline there, but
mm,
yeah, so now I'm shifting again because it's like this is why sometimes on social media I get frustrated because as much as I want to validate people, I've also been through the gamut and I'm not over here saying all men, all men, all men. And I've also been through the gamut and I'm not saying I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. A lot of crap
mm,
has happened in a lot of people's lives. And if I can do it and I'm just me, you can do it too. The difference between me and someone who's not doing it is the fact that I just did it. I just made the content anyway. And
mm,
I would get screamed at on the phone, be
mm,
crying my eyes out, and have to just 5 minutes before getting on a group coaching call, have to just brush it away
mm,
and get on the call and coach men, even though I just been freaking shouted at by someone who was declaring to be the love of my life on the back end was
mm,
lying to me. You know what I mean? So it's like those aren't places in your life you want to be. Nobody likes them. They're incredibly painful at the darkest time in my entire life. But if you can be a person who resolves to make no excuses for yourself, and the fact that, like, dude, I can't stay in this dark place, I got to do whatever it takes to get out, then you will win. And I think that's like the embodiment that I would like to see in men, that you're not a freaking loser. So don't embody this mentality that you're a victim. You can have bad things happen to you, but don't claim the victim robe. Don't put that superhero suit on, because you become a villain. You become a villain. And that's what I want to teach men, is that, like, just because I'm validating you doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're broken. You just have some things that you need to work on, and you are capable. You're not incapable. You are perfectly capable of doing it. So it's like, let's empower you. Let's go. You can do it.
Thank you for sharing all of your story. I know it was painful.
Sorry, it was drawn out. Just cut it all out of the podcast.
It's beautiful. We're gonna keep all of it. It's real, Elise. Like I think it gets forgotten that you may have challenges too. Successful woman, attractive woman, businesswoman. Oh, what do you have to complain about? And so I want to and also, like, oh, you have a following. Somehow the number next to your Instagram handle or TikTok handle, people then associate with the ease of your life, as opposed to, oh, there's a real human behind there who grew up in a real family and has a real boyfriend and is going through a real scenario and is feeling real pain. So I love also just the humanization. I think that's gotten lost a bit on social media, and the pedestalization period, just from the views. So I appreciate what you're sharing. And we have another ethos tenet, right? Of the last one is fight hurt. And I want to say the same thing to so many guys. Like, you are going to get your ass kicked at some point. Now, what are you going to fucking do about it? Right? Yeah, lay down for a bit, lick your wounds. I get it. You got your ass handed to you. Now it's time to get up and throw one punch back, just one. If you can do that, you can start a ball rolling. And that isn't just for men. I know plenty of women who have been in the same meat grinder of an initiation that you went through. And I say fight hurt. If you followed any of our stuff in the last 2 years, you'll know Dewey Freeman, our elder therapist. And he's constantly saying, you got to fight for your life. And it's not someone broke into my house and now I'm worried about dying, but it's like my life situation requires that same, you know what, back against the wall, let's crack some knuckles and get after it mentality. So one, I salute you for not just for growing the business, Elise. I think that is admirable, and I want to give you kudos for that. But just how you have come out of this initiation, because a lot of people, as you know, don't, or they come out of it and they're like, "Sweet, I hate women, I love heroin, and porn. So these are my new things. This is my new life." So I honor you on that. Are you open to
Thank
sharing
you.
a little bit about your um, about following Christ and of going that way? I don't have a religious background, so I don't speak to it, but I know a lot of listeners are quite religious, and we have a number of Christians, and I'm so curious how that faith piece changed for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked, because I was just about to lead into that. And I love your ethos, by the way. Your ethos is
Thank
so
you.
good. And I cannot sum it up better. I was fighting for my life, dog, the last 2 years, fighting for my fucking life. And that's the thing, dude. And I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm literally not, because it literally was death. It was, and especially the
Mm,
last few months when it all just fell apart because I couldn't bring myself to leave. It was so toxic and so bonded. And I had committed, and I was more committed to the fact that I said I was committed to something than I was to giving up on it. Cause I was like, fuck, I've already sunk this time in. I've already suffered this much. It was like time
mm,
plus suffering. I was like, I'm going to suffer until I fucking die, because I said I was all in and I have to see some type of payoff for this. But at the
mhm,
same time, I had been hearing, and I've always had a relationship with God. Like, I've always believed in God and Jesus, but I'm not baptized. I never associated with religious churches or anything like that because I felt ostracized from them when I was younger. I didn't agree with, I was like, I never read the Bible. I was just like, whatever, that's man-made stuff. They have all these rules to like support their beliefs, whatever. I know God supports me and loves me. Like I had my own idea. But throughout these couple years, like in the last year, it was like I kept getting these little hints and signals to get more invested in God and more invested in God in the way of church, in the way of reading the Bible. And so like people started coming to my life, like Tommy McAllister and his wife, they're Christian couples coaches. And I actually met them through my ex, not my recent ex, but the one before. And it's just funny how years before things will be planted into your life to divinely guide you. And so he was like very supportive, like when I would ask them questions. And so it was like in and out while I was in this relationship. And then in the last couple months when I was literally fighting for my life, be sitting on the ground of my apartment, just crying my eyes out like, God, I need help. I don't have the strength to end this. If he's not meant to be in my life, please make it obvious. Please make it go away peacefully. I know it. Like I give myself to you. Like I just need help. Like you get down to a place where you're so fucking low. You're like, I don't even care if this is real or not. I need somebody to help me. And Tommy had said something to me that really stuck with me. He said, lay this relationship at Christ's feet. And I just got such a visual of, wow, it was just so powerful to me to think like, wow, I can lay my burden somewhere else and it will take care of it. Like, and I always say it doesn't matter to me if it's real or not, because I know some people would be like, oh, you're part, like since I've posted about it on social, people like, you're part of a cult and whatever, but it's like, it doesn't even matter because it's like, I don't care what anybody else believes. I think, so sorry. Anyway, the relationship ended. And of course I was fucking devastated. I felt like death. Like it was a death. It was absolutely a death. I could not be. And I visualized burying myself actually, like having a little funeral because I knew I could never be that girl again who accepted that terrible treatment, who got into that type of relationship, who believed somebody like that. And I said, I am in a grieving period of myself. And I've grieved myself before, but this was huge. This was like completely, I was so committed to this person. And then I was in Tampa and I had known one girl here in the building. That's why I moved in the building. And she was going to this church called Radiant. Shout out Radiant, Tampa. And I went and it just, they're like concerts now. They're like concerts and they're so good with the music. And Pastor Aaron Burke, he's really good. It's like they give you a lesson. And at first I didn't resonate, but I kept going back. And then it just felt more and more in alignment. And as I healed, and it was like this last couple weeks, I just was at a point where I went to a conference and the story really touched me. Like Ed Milet was there and other people were there. And I had already said, like, I'm getting more into God, but I still was like, still not baptized. I'm still not necessarily committing to religion, I want to say, but I've given up saying I'm spiritual instead of religious. Like I am religious. I am fully committed to God. I made this investment. And it's been the best decision I ever made in my life because the community, the embodiment of the lessons in the Bible. Like I started reading the Bible. I'm like, damn, there's like some good lessons in here. Like this is like the oldest book. I'm like, why would I go to any one man when I can go here and there's a lesson for everything? And I just feel more in alignment. I feel more fulfilled. I feel wholer. And since I made that commitment too, I was like, you know what? Like I'm on a path of like singleness or whatever. Like I just felt like because before that I was like, I'm searching for a husband and I always make these jokes about it. I just felt so empty. And since I made this decision of like, you know what, I'm just going to follow God and commit to being in relationship with God purely, like I'm fully committed to this relationship because he is eternal. He's the only one who has unconditional love. He's the only quote unquote father that is perfect, that will never let me down. We can have fathers that we love that are good role models, but a man is always going to have flaw. And I mean, man is in humankind in general. Your mom's going to let you down. Your sister's going to let you down. Your dad's going to let you down. Your heavenly father is not going to let you down. And that's the one who walks with you through the darkness. And I just said, you know what? As many people who supported me through that dark time, Nobody knows the pain that I was going through when I was sitting on the floor fighting for my life. It was between me and God, and he was the one, like I said, whether he's real or not, that's what I needed. The embodiment of someone who was walking with me, who I could lay this relationship down with, who I knew had something better for me. And so when you can put your trust into something, it allows you to not like, and I've never really been an anxious person, but for anybody listening, like, it allows you to be able to like let go of control, to trust that of course the hard times are going to come, but they're also going to end. That something is always divinely guided towards you. Like I said, I didn't know why I met Tommy and why I became better friends with him than my ex was even. Why did that happen? Well, he's helped bring God into my life. You know, like everything is divinely guided. And if you can look at your life that way and see all the puzzle pieces fitting together, life becomes so much easier. And so since I made that decision to fully commit to Christ, it was like just this internal sense of like, okay, everything makes sense and I never need to worry about anything ever again. Like I don't question anything, and I never really did before, but now it's like I just don't know how to explain it. I feel like anybody who's like found Christ, like just they understand this. I feel fulfilled. I feel so happy. Like I went to a women's church group this morning and I'm like, damn, dude. And these are good people. Like not everybody who says they're a Christian. I do not believe that at all. Some people say that they're Christian or whatever. And that's why I haven't fully committed yet. But you are able to understand that people who are on a path where they want to embody good values and good morals and treat people kind. And the Bible is always talking about, you know, those who seek to save their life will lose it, and those who seek to lose it will save it. So it's like, what are you giving up so that you can earn? How are you giving back? How are you paying people back in this lifetime so you can live in eternity, right? And a lot of people are just being so consumeristic, so materialistic in this life. They're forgetting the whole point that we're literally going to die. And I don't think necessarily that there actually is a heaven and hell. I know it's totally opposite of what I've been preaching about God and Jesus and whatever, but I think that heaven and hell is the embodiment of the type of life you're living on earth right now. I went through hell, literal hell, for the last 2 years because I did something I should not have done, and it was not morally correct, and it was not in alignment with what God would have wanted me to do. If I had consulted God first and actually listened, I would have avoided that hell that I put myself through. But that now was what I had to, the price I had to pay to be able to experience something much better on the other side. Okay, I'm done now. Sorry, that was so long.
I so appreciate you. Truly. Thank you.
It's a sermon.
We love passion here. I just love authenticity, Elise. And that is one of the big things that we're trying to push here, whether it comes in organized religion, whether it comes in atheism, whether it comes in weightlifting, whether it comes in relationship, whether it comes in poetry, dance. I don't give a fuck. I just want people to feel the way that you felt giving that talk and feel with that relationship. And I don't care who, where, what, or why, but I think giving the audience an imprint of this is what it's like to have faith. This is what it's like to know that there's a relationship with the divine in whatever form that comes to you, I think is a really beautiful gift to the audience. So thank you for sharing all of that. And thank you for the work you did in the last 2 years to get through that. I feel you and believe you. Again, I'll say what I said to you earlier. Like, I believe you. That was a fight for your life. And I don't want this to sound patronizing, but good work. Fuck yeah. Well done. Like a high five
Thank you.
in
I
your
had to
whole life.
lose it. I was fighting for my life that I needed to lose.
Yeah.
Right? Because when I fully surrendered to God, it was like, that's it. That is the death. That is the grand circle of that life. And I'll never be that woman again. And I feel bad for her. And I'm still working through like the hatred of my
course.
ex.
Yeah.
And so I have to work on forgiveness with God. You know, but like it gets easier. It gets easier because God also says to forgive, not with the capacity that you have, but with the capacity that he has. And forgiving someone else, it more so means forgiving yourself for
sure.
being dumb, for attracting them, for the pain that you have to endure. and I don't want to become bitter. And that's like my biggest, I have a big ego when it comes to healing. This is good for your audience. Like if you are stuck on healing, like I have two sides of me, right? I have this very gentle side that is like on my social media. And then I got part of me as a little ghetto, as a little gangster. This is the real me. And sometimes I get in this mode because this is what gets me fired up sometimes. It's like, if you can't gentle parent yourself into healing, then you gotta get your ego going, because I would hate for anybody who has wronged me to look at me and go, oh man, look at what happened to her. Like dodged a bullet there, dodged a bullet there. Oh, I could never imagine, right? I could never imagine. Or they're beating me in life. They get to be happy and I'm not happy. They get to be happy. How, that's so unfair. That's so unjust. So I'm not going to spend my time, being bitter and trying to hate them and then getting uglier because I have this bitter energy, disgusting personality. I'm going to just try as best as I can to let that shit go, because I want to win. Dude, I want them to look at me and be ashamed. I want my sun to be so bright that it blinds them. I want their friends and family to know who I am, and then they don't know that we were together, so they're like, oh my God, have you seen this girl? She's so awesome. And they're reminded of me every day, not because I'm bitter, but because of how awesome everybody thinks I am. And that's your ego. But you know what? If it gets you through, it gets you through. That's all I'm saying. That's your sermon for today. You be so successful that you make them ashamed. And then they go, oh yeah, we used to date. And you go, I don't even know who you are. Where's the proof? Where's the receipts? I don't know that person anymore. That wasn't me. So get real with it, But they have to live with it in their every day, So sometimes your ego can be a good thing. That's all I'm saying.
I'm gonna have to find some way to put like gangster and Christ in the podcast title. So thank you for ending on a gangster note. I appreciate
the man
you.
who marries me is gonna get so many different flavors, dude. God's like, yo, I made this one with Pop Rocks. I don't know, like it's a trap. It's a trick.
Elise, where can people find you? Where are you hanging out these days? Where's the best place if someone in the audience wants to work with you? Where do they do that?
Well, apparently on the streets, like you told them earlier.
You know what I mean. Oh boy.
You can find me on these streets.
Well,
you put that as the opener to the show. At least we're going to find you on these streets. Men's mental health coach extraordinaire.
You've got word out so nobody knows.
Hilarious. I'm anywhere the internet can be found at Elise Michaels, Micheals. I will never DM you for a reading. I know people get that a lot. That's not me. But
thank you for coming on. Thank you for being you. I appreciate you and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.